Chicago sports legends hit the links for a great cause. Tune in to NBC5 Saturday, September 25th at 6 p.m. for the Celebrity Golf Classic, presented by your Chicago area and Northwest Indiana Lexus dealers, official auto sponsor of the Celebrity Golf Classic. On this edition of the Cubs Talk podcast, brought to you by Wintrust, home of Cubs checking with free ATMs nationwide, Tim Stebbins, Gordon Wittenmyer, and I discuss Jon Lester and his Hall of Fame candidacy now that he's won his 200th game in that awful-looking Cardinals uniform. And we talk about shortstop depth and the Darvish trade in the Cubs system.
At Wintrust, we know true fans show their team pride every chance they get. With Cubs checking, you'll score a Cubs debit card, so you can show your support every time you pay. Open today at wintrust.com/Cubs Talk. $100 required to open. Member FDIC.
Let's play two.
Back! Way back! It might be! It could be! It is! Holy cow! The fly! He scores! Cubs win! Cubs win! Ball! Game! Over! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Welcome in to the Cubs Talk podcast, brought to you by Wintrust, home of Cubs checking with free ATMs nationwide. With Tim Stebbins all over the Cubs beat as our insider, our senior insider at GW Cub. He's the great Gordon Wittenmyer, Tony Gill. I'm David Kaplan. We've got a lot to discuss, gentlemen. Gordon, you were on a tour through the minors. You have a story dropping on Cubs shortstop prospects. But I want to start with Jon Lester, who won his 200th game in that awful-looking St. Louis Cardinals uniform. Your guys' thought on Jon Lester. Is he a Hall of Famer? And does he go in as a Cub if you say yes?
I'll let you go first, Tim.
I'll start with, it was definitely weird, and I think for a lot of Cubs fans wrong almost to see him in the Cardinals uniform in general, obviously, but the 200th win, getting it with St. Louis, I think that was definitely weird. I feel like that was kind of part of why he wanted to come back to Chicago in any case, and that was obviously because he had 6 years here and he wanted to stay, but that was a talking point, it seemed like that milestone. He was 7 wins away from 200 coming into 2021, and he went to Washington. He got 3 wins there in the Final Four with St. Louis. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think, a lot of people see 200, and I think there's some reaction out there that's like, well, it's not 300, but the game has changed so much in the last 10 years, even the last 5, right? And I think 200 is going to kind of turn into, in a way, being viewed as the new 300, and that doesn't, discount guys who get 300 because it's, there's still guys who are going to hit that threshold in all likelihood. But I think with how pitchers are used now, that is definitely a new milestone marker. And he's a 5-time All-Star. He hasn't won a Cy Young, but he's finished top 4 3 times here, and he's got 3 World Series on top of it, and he's won 9 games in the playoffs. So I think that's going to add up to a Hall of Fame selection. I don't know if it's first ballot, but I definitely think that's where he's headed. He's got so much success postseason and personal as well.
Gordon, is he a Hall of Famer?
Well, it's interesting. I have a vote, right? So at some point, I'll have to decide whether to cast a vote in his favor or not. And right now, I'm not sure. Coming into this season, I thought, well, he's on kind of on that fence, and he needs to obviously get to 200 wins just to have some of those counting stats that you look for. And I think Tim's right that it's a different day and age, and 300 is no longer the marker. I mean, we may never see another 300 game winner, but I'm not sure. He pitched in an era where there a few 300 winners finished their careers, so I'm not sure he falls entirely in this new age of 200 maybe being the new benchmark. But again, it's pitching wins, so that's been diminished as a statistic in recent years anyway. 3.65 ERA, it's okay. I like 3 times he's a top 4 in the Cy Young. Another time he was in the top 10. He's reinvented himself a couple of times, and here's a case that I made for Bert Blyleven in deciding to vote for him. Now, one of the differences, Bert Blyleven played on some bad teams, didn't get to 300 wins, probably because he played on a lot of bad teams. Lester can't claim that. But one of the things that they both have is a real stepped up performance in the postseason. And I think that that's one of those intangibles that does matter. A guy that, we say pitching wins don't matter as much, but a guy that helps your team win, a guy that's a winner, a guy that, and as a starting pitcher, there's no more bigger impact at any position than that guy when he plays. And he's won 3 championships, including the championship in Chicago. And he didn't win the 04 one in Boston, but he backed it up in 07 and then was there again in 13. I think I'm leaning toward him. I'd like to see what else he can get done between now and the time he retires.
Okay, let me ask you guys this. Roy Halladay, is that a fair comp for John Lester?
No.
Roy Halladay ended his career, may he rest in peace, with 203 wins. John Lester will be right there with him in terms of winning the championship. What he did in Game 7 on 3 days rest, 2.5 days rest. You mentioned his titles in Boston. You mentioned his Cy Young finishes. He is known as a postseason pitcher.
Cap, Halladay was a better pitcher. Hands down,
not saying he was better, but that's a fair comp.
No, it's not a fair comp because Halladay's a better pitcher, period. Guy pitched 16 years in the big leagues, and he did it better than Lester did. 8 All-Stars. He won 2 Cy Youngs. He pitched I believe correct me if I'm wrong, did he pitch a no-hitter in the postseason? He had way more top 5 Cy Young finishes. He's just a better pitcher. Eye test, stats, everything you look at, and they've got a comparable length of career. I don't think it's a fair comp. I think Roy Halladay is a head and shoulders above Lester, and that's not taking anything away from Lester. I just don't think it's a good comp.
Okay, let me give you this number. He won 2 World Series with the Red Sox, 1 with the Cubs, and has made more postseason starts in which he allowed 1 or no runs than anybody in the history of baseball other than Tom Glavine or Andy Pettitte. And they had so many chances at the postseason. 3rd all time. Also going into last year, and of course it was pandemic-induced, he was one of only 10 pitchers to post a winning percentage of .640 or better over more than 350 starts. The only ones not in the Hall of Fame, Roger Clemens, and then Halladay just went in, and John Lester. Pretty impressive numbers, man.
I'm trying to find comps for him. Those are really impressive numbers. I mean,
comps for him are Lefty Gomez and Roy Halladay in the article I just quoted to you guys from Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, I'm looking at other guys from his era, and like CC Sabathia, 6-time All-Star. Lester is 5. CC has 1 Cy Young. Lester didn't get any, and CC only won 1 World Series. But he also won 50 more starts than Lester, and ERA is pretty comparable. So I don't know, man. Like I think we talk about all these pitchers. Lester's got the numbers, I think, to get in. I'm with Goran. I don't think Halladay's a necessarily comp, but I do think that he's got this resume, and the counting stats matter. They're nice, I guess you could say. They're nice on top of all the decorated career he's had. So I think it's gonna get to a point, like maybe not first ballot, like I said, but he seems like a guy, like it just seems like an obvious pick at some point.
Yeah, I think he'll eventually get in. I think. And he may linger there for a while on the ballot, getting close. But I also think one thing in his favor is people are going to look at it and say, not only did he maybe overcome a little adversity to get there, but he did it clean. He reinvented himself a couple times. in order to stay competitive. I think all those kinds of things add to your resume in a way that doesn't show up on Baseball Reference. And I think a lot of the voting pool recognizes that. They pitched a long time in the American League, pitched a long time in the National League. So almost all of the voters would have seen him for a lot of his starts. So I think, and maybe even had a chance to talk to him and people around him to get a sense of who he was on his teams too. And I think all that's going to play in his favor.
Here are the similarity scores from Baseball Reference for Jon Lester. Dwight Gooden, David Cone, Cole Hamels, Justin Verlander, Roy Halladay, Tim Hudson, Zach Greinke, Jimmy Key, and Dave McNally. Those are the most similar pitchers to him for his career.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because we're talking about a lot of guys on the bubble, guys that aren't in there. You know, Gooden had that huge peak, didn't have the longevity. Cone didn't have really a lengthy peak. Jimmy Key, same thing. Cole Hamels, he's not eligible yet. Dave McNally had a short peak.
Verlander
will probably get in.
Halladay is the
Lackey
only
probably
one of those
won't.
that I gave you that is in the Hall of Fame today.
Well, and a couple of those guys, though, like Greinke probably gets in. He's not eligible yet. Verlander's not eligible yet. He'll get in. Hamels isn't eligible yet. I'd be surprised if he gets in. And so it's a lot of fence guys. Mm-hmm. And that's why this is a really interesting discussion. We need to have it over some scotches or beer.
Yeah, count me in. Let's do it. That would be fun.
Hudson's interesting because in 2021, like in January, he barely remained on the ballot. He's a like 5.2% of the vote he got, and you need 5% of the threshold. So if that's a comp, like that kind of stood out to me when you listed his name. I do think what the thing with Lester is that once it's all said and done with him, he's going to be remembered. You're going to see his numbers, but I think he's just going to be remembered as a winner, man. Like
big game guy.
No question.
Yeah, like the 200 wins are nice. It's it's a nice round number, as I think he put it. But I mean, not only Boston with the World Series there, but then he comes here and like I think a lasting memory for a lot of people is going to be not only Game 5, they're down 3-1 and they're about to be eliminated after this magical season. He comes in and shuts down Cleveland, but then he comes out of the bullpen in Game 7. He played a big part in that game before, obviously it kind of went against the Cubs' favor in the late innings and then had to go to extras. But I just think anywhere he went, short of like that wild card start with Oakland against Kansas City in 2014, like he just won everywhere he went, and I think that matters.
Do you think, Gordon, you're a voter?
Yeah.
Do you think that when people vote, they're the Gordon Wittenmeyer of Minneapolis or Boston or Tampa, whoever they are, that they look and go, that dude I watched on my television pitching in huge games for Boston, Chicago, I'm going to take that into account, even if the numbers aren't quite there? Or do you writer types all just go, what are the numbers? Yes or no? Okay,
so I'm going to qualify that because a Hall of Fame voter has to have 10 consecutive years as a member of the BBWAA. So we're getting to the point where some of the newer voters are starting to fall into that latter class you described, where they lean so hard on numbers or some of the newer analytics or bigger deals. I call them nerds. And I'm not the only one. I threatened to get Jordan Bastian a propeller head hat, and he wants one. So that's all you need to know. Shout out to Jordan. Hey, buddy, you got your hat coming. But a lot of the people on the rolls right now are old school. Honestly, probably a majority of them. So I do think that what you see with your eyes, what you saw in the postseason, what you see of this guy, what he gives you in big games will play a role in the vote. But what your eyes also tell you, you could be a guy saying, I watched that guy for years and he couldn't even throw the ball to first base. So, it depends on who the voter is and what all comes into play. So
All right.
it's going to be fascinating to watch, honestly.
One more question, and we can move on to the modern day Cubs. If you are mistreated, and I know the last 18 months there hasn't been a lot of locker room access, but if it's not a pandemic, Gordon Wittenmeyer, Tim Stebbins, they walk in the locker room and they go up to John Doe of the whatever team and, hey, man, can I talk to you? No, get the F away from my locker. I don't talk to the media. And they are surly as all get out to work with. But their numbers are, they're not crystal clear. It's not like they're Babe Ruth, but they're close. And like they should probably get in. And if they'd been a really nice guy, they might got a vote.
I know where you're going with
just like Bob let that influence your vote.
I can't speak for everybody. It doesn't influence my vote. I'm in their world. They're not in mine. How their teammates view them matters a whole hell of a lot more than how I view them personally. I can't speak for everybody. Those voters who are my friends over the years, who I have talked to about the vote, treat it very seriously and respectful, and they don't include those biases in there, at least not consciously. I've voted for a lot of assholes over the years, and I try to do it based on what they meant to their teams, what they did on the field, primarily. I mean, there's a few other, I guess, intangibles that could come into play, but like if you're an asshole to your teammate and teammates, and you actually rubbed against the grain of the effort to win, well, yeah, that probably works against you.
How about character?
Well, that's what I'm talking about, right?
No, I'm talking about personal character.
You're talking about Kurt Schilling is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm talking about this guy had an issue with his wife, or this guy got a DUI multiple times, that stuff. But he's clearly like O.J. Simpson is still in the Hall of Fame. Ty Cobb is in the Hall of Fame. The NFL Hall of Fame, or Football Hall of Fame, pro football does not take character into account. Was he a Hall of Fame player or not? That's
I don't vote for steroid guys. I think that's a character issue.
Mm-hmm.
But how a guy, but that's a character issue competitively within the game. Some of the off the field stuff I have a lot harder time bringing into the equation, and so I try where I can, the best of my ability, to leave that out. And when it comes to how a guy might have dealt with me, I leave that out altogether.
Steb?
I feel like I meant to say this at the top of this, and then obviously, but anyway, like we talked about, if only numbers matter, and I think if that was the case, you would see a lot of the PED era guys in, right? Like I definitely think, not even just talking about PEDs, but that stuff does matter, I think, and like Gordon saying, in the context of the game, I agree with that. Like, that's a character issue within the game, and it is their world, and how are they viewed within the game? I think that's what that matters for this Hall of Fame that is a pure baseball thing. I see why some people might see the other stuff and kind of bring that into the discussion as well. But my overarching point is that if it was a pure numbers game, guys like Sammy Sosa would be in the Hall of Fame by now, and he's not. So I think that's just the kind of clear point.
Yeah, and the difference for me is I'm not talking about steroids, because then I question your performance. I can't vote Barry Bonds. My son was raised. Hey, Brett, who's the all-time home run champion? Hank Aaron, Dad. That's how my kids all answer it, because, yes, that dude's amazingly talented. He cheated. I don't trust his numbers. Roger Clemens, I don't trust his numbers. He cheated. I believe he was a steroid guy. I don't believe Sammy's a Hall of Famer. He never failed a test. My eyes, I have two sources, my right eye and my left eye. I was there covering that team in that locker room. That guy blew up like a balloon, and I love Sammy. Great player. I think he should be back. Welcome at Wrigley. Hall of Fame, different story. That's where I'm at. All right, let's move to the shortstops.
Hey, wait. Does Lester go in as a Cub or a Red Sox player?
Wow. I'll say that John Lester goes in as a Red Sox. because he's unhappy how the Cubs handled his departure.
Yeah, I don't
Wasn't he
feel
unhappy with how the Red Sox handled the departure too?
Yeah, exactly, right? He was pissed off at him that they traded him and then lowballed him in free agency.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
But here's the thing: they don't leave it in. Only the player only gets a little bit of input anymore,
Right.
And so, yeah, I think he probably, if it's left up to Hall of Fame, probably goes in as a Boston guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's pitched more there, and he won 2 rings compared to 1 here. And what do you have, 1 or 2 no hitters in Boston? I think, in spite of the sour ending where he gets traded to Oakland 7 years ago, I think just the longevity there, like, that makes sense. Here's the interesting thing is, like, when you get, if it was a couple more years here, I could totally see a case for the Cubs, and that's something like Albert Pujols, who was with St. Louis for so long, but then he gets a 10-year deal with the Angels, and that's a question now. And I couldn't fathom Albert Pujols not wearing a Cardinals hat in the Hall of Fame, but the more time you spend with a different team, it definitely becomes a debate. But I think because he spent more time with Boston, John Lester, than the Cubs, I think that's just where it comes for me.
You guys realize this guy's going to pitch in the playoffs again? Who the hell saw that coming?
Yeah, crazy.
Especially in April or May.
Crazy.
Hello, I'm Robbie Earle.
And I'm Robbie Mustoe, here to tell you about the Two Robbies podcast.
The Two Robbies podcast has you covered on everything involving Premier League as we review, analyse and debate the key storylines from every single match week.
We also delve into the Champions League, Europa League, key international competitions and invite some special guests along the way to discuss the latest happenings in world football.
So make sure to follow the Two Robbies podcast wherever you listen to podcasts or watch by subscribing to the NBC Sports YouTube channel.
Last year, so many people went the extra mile. Healthcare workers went above and beyond. Parents took on the additional role of school teachers. Scientists developed COVID tests and vaccines in record time. If you are running the Chicago Marathon, this is your chance to return the favor. Because this year, you can actually walk an extra mile to honor someone who went the extra mile, or you. So, who are you going the extra mile for? Learn more at the Abbott Health and Fitness Expo, October 8th or 9th at McCormick Place. Abbott, life to the fullest.
All right, let's talk shortstops. Gordon has another outstanding article dropping at NBCSportsChicago.com and the My Teams app. You can get Tim's articles and Gordon's articles all right there. You have an article dropping on shortstops. The highest ranked shortstop in the system is Christian Hernandez, who's 6'2", 175.
Baby A-Rod.
17 years of age. The second highest is Ed Howard, who's the 7th ranked prospect according to MLB.com, MLB Pipeline. Ed is 19 years of age, 6'2", 185. He's at high A ball. And then the 8th ranked prospect is a much bigger kid, 6'4", 185. He's 18 years of age. He's at rookie ball. He came over in the Yu Darvish deal, Reggie Preciado. So of those guys, they have a kid named James Triantos as well. He's their 11th ranked prospect. He's at rookie ball. Of those guys, do they have someone close to the big leagues that you think they're not signing or trying to sign? Story or Seager or Correa? They're not doing any of that because these guys are close, or they have to go get a shortstop.
Well, when you say Story or Correa or any of those guys, you're talking 6+ year contracts.
Correct.
At that point, it doesn't matter whether they're close or not. It just matters whether you think they're going to be your guy or not, because those high-end guys will be there much sooner than that. So now it becomes the calculus becomes, if you really believe in these guys, they're all teenagers, man. The best of the best in the Cubs system are teenagers, which means none of them might make it, or maybe they all make it and they can't all play shortstop. So they move around or they get traded for pitching or whatever comes along. We've seen that happen, right? So in the meantime, do you think these guys are the real deal? This baby A-Rod, Hernandez, a lot of people think he's the best, regardless of position, signed in that last year's international class. got $3 million. That's a big signing bonus these days. And, he's that kind of skill set. So if you start projecting that, do you go out and get Carlos Correa and give him 6+ years? Maybe you go out and get Simeon and give him 2 years, 2 and an option. Maybe you stopgap some of these positions.
I think you could move Correa to third.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Go back to World Baseball Classic. That's where he played when they had 3 shortstops on that team. So that could happen for sure, especially as he ages. So all these things come into play. It's fascinating. They got nobody close. And one of the interesting things is, like, you go back to the last time they rebuilt, they had a bunch of shortstops, right? But those were much higher ranked on the top 100 lists, and they were much closer. Hell, one of them was in the big leagues, Castro. Another one was Javi Baez, who was drafted 9th overall right before Theo and Jed got there. And then Addison Russell gets traded over, a guy that got drafted 11th overall. And he's close to ready. So at one point they had all 3 of those guys, all highly ranked in a really top-heavy organization that had all these super prospects. Now they're looking at depth and lower minors as they do this, and it's really interesting, the things they're going to have to take into consideration, even if these guys are as good as they think they are.
Tim, what's your take on where this shortstop class is?
Well, they have like a bunch. So, are you talking about the prospects or the upcoming free agent class?
No. The prospects.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the prospects, like, this is going to sound more bogus than I mean to sound. They better have a shortstop in the system because they've got a bunch, and I think that's promising because you can, like, kind of as Gordon touches on, like, you got a bunch. You can move these guys around. Shortstops, you can never have too many shortstops. I'll say that all the way to my grave.
Plus, some of them outgrow the position.
Yeah, like, here's an example. James Trianos was their second-round pick this year, and he was a prep shortstop, but if I'm not mistaken, he was announced as a third baseman. So, he's, I think, like 6'2". Yeah, so, and I'll say this about Correa, and I think like Correa's, a lot of people are going to want Carlos Correa. We talked about it. We know that, but he said in February he was willing to move to third in Houston or with a new team as a free agent. And whether that's because a lot of teams already have shortstops, and this is a way to make his market bigger, and it only makes sense. He's got experience there. I don't know, but you have that option, as Gordon's saying, where a lot of these Cubs prospect shortstops are a couple years away. So maybe it's a matter of, if you sign Correa or you sign Simeon, who's played some second base this year with Toronto, actually all year, I should say. You sign somebody, and then these guys come up eventually, and then, what happened with, like, Russell, right? Russell took over shortstop for the Cubs here. We saw it. They moved Starlin Castro to second. So I like that they have a lot of options, though, man. I mean, I'm obviously Hernandez is the big one, but then Ed Howard, Preciado, Trianos, Kevin Made, like, it goes on and on and on. And I think that's a great problem to have. And I wouldn't even call it a problem because you can move these guys around. And maybe at some point, if you have a clear couple guys, maybe some of them are trade pieces.
Gordon, you ready to get triggered?
Jesus, what do you got?
5 years from now, we're going to look back on it and say, boy, that Yu Darvish deal was brilliant.
You're not going to trigger me, Cap. Look, I said it at the time, and I'll go to my grave saying it. A big market team doesn't make a trade like that. Simple. You gave up on 2021 when you did that, and you say, well, they were in first place in June. Yeah, and they did it against all odds with smoke and mirrors for starting pitching, and eventually that's what derailed them. Now you can get in the weeds if you want on Darvish's performance since the end of June, and we can argue that all day long. But a big market team does not trade away a guy who's making 21 a year with 3 years left on his contract, coming off a Cy Young runner-up season when they just won a division title and the division's wide open again. You don't do that. You're a big market club. It's bullshit. Now, they traded for Davies, a stopgap guy, and a whole bunch of 19-year-olds. These 19-year-olds, I said it at the time, they might be friggin' great, but they're crapshoots. They're still crapshoots. Owen Casey looks really good at A-ball. They just finished up their season. He looked really good. Kevin Made looks really good. Well, they get Made in the deal. Preciado looks really good. They got another guy, Yasiel Santana, in that deal. They like him. Fine. Maybe but they're still crapshoots, Cap. And if they make it, great. They rolled the dice and the number came up. Cool. It's still a bad deal for a big market club. You don't do that shit, and you don't try to sell your fans on that as some kind of smart guy thing.
And so what you're saying is, if it works out, you got lucky.
There's a lot of luck involved. Now, you've got scouts that are going and finding these skill sets, and those skill sets are real. I don't doubt that, but there's so much development between being a teenager and getting to the big leagues that what happens in between is the crapshoot. So there's just no way around that. That happens all the time. So, yes, there's a lot of luck that will be involved in any of those guys making it.
But, Tim, you know that the narrative will be, if Reggie Preciado ends up being a really, really good shortstop for the Cubs for 8 years, and Owen Casey is playing in the outfield on a playoff team at Wrigley, Gordon will be whizzing in the wind, because the national narrative and what other people are going to write are going to be like, boy, that Jed Hoyer made an unbelievably smart trade. Gordon will be screaming, it was dumb to do it. It's bad business.
Yeah, that Jed Hoyer was really smart to have those horse shit teams at the big league level the last 4 years while they waited for this guy and other guys too, when they're making money hand over fist like nobody but maybe 2 or 3 other teams in all of baseball make. So, yeah, great job.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Genius.
I'm just telling you, you're going to look like you're whizzing in the wind, kid.
I don't care what I look like, Cap. I know what I know.
Oh, man. Look, here's the thing. If Preciado comes up and he's an impact player with the Cubs, I think it'll be said in X amount of years that, well, the trade worked out for the Cubs. But, I think that the narrative still has to include it's maybe not for the guy's whole career. That's just ridiculously unfair. But I don't know if luck's the word. I'm trying to put a better grasp on what I'm trying to say here. But, not necessarily luck, but it wasn't like the trade here's intention was to go get solely impact prospects. We know that wasn't the whole thing. It wasn't, we're going to trade you Darvish to only bolster the farm system. Part of it is the contract. We've talked about that. It got $60 million off the books. That's not going to be the narrative with this guy's career if he gets up to the big leagues. But I think that's just it's not luck, but there's this factor that isn't going to just be forgotten, I don't think. And that's not to, crap on Preciado.
Hey, let me point out one more thing, Cap. Let me just point out one more thing. We're talking about these rankings, right? And Ed Howard and Preciado and Christian Hernandez, all these guys. And I know you're talking about the Darvish trade and Preciado, but all these guys are in the top 10 in the Cubs organization. Mm-hmm. Baseball America says the Cubs organization is 24th in baseball, for one thing. Another thing is when we compare them to the Castros of the world, even Baez, Addison Russell, these guys were all in top 100 lists, top 10s, all of them.
No doubt.
So, and these guys that we're talking about, Ed Howard was on Baseball Prospectus's top 100 at 88, I think. Christian Hernandez, I don't think he's been around long enough to qualify for some of those top 100 lists. We'll see if he shows up on one. Preciado's not on any of those. None of these other guys are on any of those either. So we're not talking about slam dunk, high impact, major league all-star type projections even now. Even in a best case scenario now, I don't think it's fair to project like that.
Agreed. And we'll wrap it up here. All the praise for A.J. Preller. Man, this guy went and got Blake Snell and Yu Darvish and took out all that money. Yeah. Guess what? They'll be teeing him up with the Cubs in 2 weeks.
So he screwed up. It was a complete effed up winner on his part. I give him all the credit in the world for going for it when he had a core in place that looked like it was going to get the job done. And who at the time said that those weren't the right players to go get too? Because they sure as hell looked like it. I mean, you can apply whatever you want after the season plays out and pretend like you're the smart guy, but I don't think you were ripping him then thinking the Padres weren't going to be in the playoffs.
But the bottom line is they're not going to be.
The bottom line is tried. He tried to get there, and that's what you're supposed to do. Excuse my language.
Darvish, by the way, has
Maybe you did trigger me, Cap.
That's my goal. Every time we chop it up together.
Darvish has a better ERA than anyone in the Cubs rotation, and that includes guys like Arrieta and Williams that are no longer here. So as much as Darvish has had a rough 2-month stretch, that's still.
The bottom line is San Diego wouldn't make that trade again if they could go back and do it over.
I don't know. I disagree with that. I don't think they have a problem with that trade. They probably wouldn't have made the Snell trade. There's other deals they wouldn't have made, but they didn't give up much, Cap. They didn't give up crap.
I don't think they'd have taken the $52 million they took. They took
Maybe.
6, but they gave us Zach Davies, so it was 52.
I think imagine where their season would be if they didn't have Darvish for all the other starting pitching problems they had.
Imagine where the Cubs could have used Darvish too, right? Like talk about times where they were losing. Win day was what he was referred to as by David Ross, and you lose 11 straight. Maybe stop that.
Just look at that first half. We talk about how they were tied for first place after that combined no-hitter, which, by the way, Davies threw 6 innings of in L.A., June 24th. Up to that point, Darvish looked like a Cy Young candidate again. Maybe they got a 5-game lead if Darvish is in their rotation at that point. And maybe that changes the entire dynamic of the rest of the season.
Good point. All right, you guys have a great rest of your day. That was fun. I got Gordon triggered. That's my goal. You guys have a wonderful day. Tim, a lot of fun.
Screw you, Cap.
Tony Gill. Thank you, Gordon. Thanks for buying me coffee a couple of weeks ago. It was fun. Anyway, that is the great Gordon, great Tim, great Tony. I'm David Kaplan. Have a wonderful rest of your day. This has been the Cubs Talk Podcast, brought to you by Wintrust, home of Cubs checking with free ATMs nationwide. We will see you next time. Last year, so many people went the extra mile. Healthcare workers went above and beyond. Parents took on the additional role of school teachers. Scientists developed COVID tests and vaccines in record time. If you are running the Chicago Marathon, this is your chance to return the favor. Because this year, you can actually walk an extra mile to honor someone who went the extra mile for you. So who are you going the extra mile for? Learn more at the Abbott Health and Fitness Expo, October 8th or 9th at McCormick Place. Abbott, life to the fullest.